Not all passports are created equal. Today I'm going to explain why your passport probably isn't as good as you think it is and give you some things to think about when seeking second citizenship and creating options overseas. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson. This is Nomad Capitalist, where we've helped everyone from multiple billionaires and celebrities over the years to everyday 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors like yourself who want to legally go where you're treated best. And you can learn more at nomadcapitalist.com. Now, every year for the last 6 years, we've put out something called the Nomad Passport Index. You can check it out at nomadcapitalist.com as well. And the idea that I wanted to come out with a passport index was to rate passports, number one, where we don't have one passport that's number one and then a group of 10 that are all ranked number two and then the next 10 are ranked number three. That was ridiculous. I wanted to have an index where we said only one is number one, maybe two were tied for number two, but then after that we're going to number four, and every passport had an appropriate number because there's so much hoopla in the citizenship industry from people who want to sell you the same commoditized citizenships of saying, oh, this is the 11th best passport in the world. Now, I'm a big believer in, among other second passports, Caribbean citizenship by investment. I have one in my own portfolio. Let me tell you, it is not the 11th best passport in the world. It's convenient of some of these companies that only sell Caribbean citizenship. Hey, pick your favorite beach, to say, oh yeah, the other 72 countries that had better travel that ranked more highly, those all fit in spots 1 through 10, and then, oh, number 11, that's St. Lucia, St. Kitts and Nevis. No, that's not how it works. But the other thing that frustrated me was all these other passport indexes did, was look at visa-free travel. Because I believe in a time when governments want to take your wealth, when they're increasingly, in the West at least, going to try and tie that to your citizenship or tie that to where you've been living, when governments are taking your freedom, imposing new regulations on citizens abroad, prohibiting you from travel, threatening to cancel your passport, all those things, the idea that an extra 5 or 10 visa-free countries, probably to places you've never really cared or thought about even, that was not really a very effective thing to do. I mean, by the way, the idea that Germany is number one and South Korea is number 10 because of 2 countries, really? I mean, they're basically the same. It's like you watch John Oliver. He's like, this is Azerbaijan. This is Azerbaijan. How many people are actually going to go to Azerbaijan? If you want visa-free access to a certain country, that can be part of your second passport evaluation process. South Africans, for example, often go for Antigua and Barbuda because it's the only Caribbean citizenship by investment program that has visa-free access to South Africa. If they ever give up their South African passport, they could potentially use the Antigua passport to go back to their country of birth as a tourist. But travel in and of itself never hit me too much as the number one goal. And so I want to talk about why all passports aren't created equal. For me, when we look at the Nomad Passport Index, we covered perception of the passport. We covered taxation. We covered the ability to have dual citizenship, and we covered freedom in addition to visa-free travel. So if you look at the Nomad Passport Index, 50% of it is devoted to what you imagine a passport is for, which is traveling. And so obviously Germany, or not very far behind it, the US, those are going to rank more highly in that than, let's say, El Salvador. But yet, look at, right now, particularly in the Bitcoin community, so many people are saying, hey, I'd love to be a Salvadorian. I'd love to have an El Salvador passport. We made a separate episode on that where we showed you, hey, here are the countries that you can't go to with an El Salvador passport that an American could, and then we flipped it. Here's where you can go with only an El Salvador passport and not with a US passport. And even though you're missing a few of the biggest countries that most people want to go to, there were folks who said, hey, I feel El Salvador is going to be more of a beacon of freedom. I feel like they're a heck of a lot more likely to reduce my tax rate, potentially to zero. And you know what? I'm willing to sacrifice some travel for a better passport that's going to leave me the heck alone. And if I don't live in El Salvador, I don't have to worry about anything. I can be Salvadorian living in Singapore, living in, anywhere in the world, living in Timbuktu. And they're not going to bother me the way, for example, the US would, or other Western countries increasingly are talking about, where they're constantly trying to follow me around the world. So travel isn't all that matters. The US taxes citizens no matter where they live. And so the US passport was ranked at number 41 this year. Now, Americans will get up in arms and say that's so unfair and how dare you. Listen, out of about 200 different passports that we ranked, number 41 is not terrible. You're still in the 80th percentile or so. But you have 40 other countries, including the one right above it, Malaysia, which has dramatically superior tax policies, which by and large isn't going around picking fights with people, and so the reputation is better in most cases. When you look at some of the freedom indexes, Malaysia is maybe a little worse, or maybe a little bit better, but there's not a huge difference in some of them. And they can go to just about as many countries. It's actually a couple fewer countries than Americans. But overall, if you had to choose which country to be a citizen of, particularly a citizen who is living the nomad capitalist lifestyle and not necessarily living in your country of citizenship, Malaysia potentially is more interesting, and that's why it ranked one higher. A lot of European countries that have the same visa-free travel as the U.S., but don't have all the restrictions, they also keep themselves out of fights. They're not also poking their nose everywhere, and so therefore they're more welcome. Maybe they have more freedom of the press, freedom of movement, what have you, and they don't have the worldwide taxation. Those all rank more highly. And so, hey, a lot of people want a U.S. passport. We're not denying that. Number 41 it's not 241. We don't go that low, but it's not, it's not that bad. But if you put a U.S. and Canadian passport next to each other, which one would you choose? Now, I suppose if you just never want to leave the United States, then, hey, a U.S. passport means you're a U.S. citizen, which means you have the right to live and work there for as long as you want. Most Canadians, by the way, can easily find a way to live and work in the United States if they want to, and then they have the option to leave. And when they travel, they're going to be treated a little bit better. But if you put a U.S. and Canadian passport next to each other, yeah, I could think most people who are entrepreneurs and investors would choose the Canadian passport, especially if their goal is to be a global citizen, as we talk about here. And so that's why the Canadian passport ranked substantially higher. Right. Now, let's take the example in Europe. Take a passport from, let's say, Germany, one of the highest visa-free travel scores statistically anywhere in the world. Always in the top 3, sometimes number 1. You put a German passport down. Now, Germany's talking about opening dual citizenship. For a long time, there have been numerous restrictions on Germans having dual citizenship, but yet they can go to more countries. You put it next to a citizenship from, let's say, Portugal, where there have been a few requirements. Maybe they needed an e-visa previously to go to Turkey, or maybe they need a visa to go to Equatorial Guinea or something like that. Hey, Germany's beating them on a passport index that would rank more highly. But if I'm Portuguese, I can go to the Caribbean and I can get citizenship by investment in a matter of months, and I can take out an insurance policy on Portugal and the EU that just in case they go nuts, I have options. A German citizen has always had more difficulty doing that. Now, Germany may open up to that. The trend is certainly in favor of dual citizenship. The Netherlands, well, maybe the more restrictive one soon. But if I have options, I had a colleague once. He was Austrian, and I said, would you rather claim your Polish citizenship from your ethnicity, from your background, from your family tree? Now, Poland at the time didn't have visa-free access to the U.S., which for someone who travels all around the world, that was a valuable thing, right? Austrians can go to the U.S. At the time, Polish citizens couldn't. Now they can. And I said, well, he was discussing living in Chile for a while. And I said, oh, you could qualify for Chilean citizenship. By the way, Chileans can go to the United States without a visa. I said, would you rather claim the Polish citizenship, have all the same rights in the European Union, have all the same travel privileges, except that one U.S. piece, and then 5 or 6 years from now, you can be Chilean, you've got another passport in a different part of the world, and then you get your U.S. access back. It was an interesting conversation. Which one would you rather have? From an optionality standpoint, with the crazy world we live in, I'm probably going to choose that I want to have 2 passports. And so when you put one that doesn't allow dual with one that does allow dual, that to me is a difference. And that's why Germany, despite topping the charts of most passport indexes, because they can travel to aforementioned Equatorial Guinea or Sao Tome or some other country that maybe you don't really care about without a visa. Maybe they can go to Cuba and someone else can't. That's not really the benefit of a German passport, right? And yet the hindrance of a German passport has been that restriction, right? Freedom is another issue. How free is your country? If you don't have freedom, whether it's in your country or if they follow you around the world, or if that reputation follows you around the world, that's not going to be as interesting. And so again, would I rather be a UK citizen, which obviously is less valuable now to some people, at least from a travel perspective, that they're not part of the European Union, at least at a nominal level. Or would I rather be a citizen of Belgium, for example? And the reason being is that when you look at some of the freedom scores and the reputation scores, the UK does a little bit more poorly. Again, because they're generally next to the US, they're kind of picking fights with people. They're more visible on the world stage. Whereas, who really knows what Belgium is thinking? I mean, unless you're a real policy wonk, are you really sorry Belgians, but are most people around the world giving thought to what Belgium's policies are and then kind of giving the stink eye to a Belgian who comes to their country or giving them some grief when applying for a residence permit? I'm not saying that most Americans and British citizens are going to have a hard time applying for residence in some countries. Certainly they will in a few. But the reputational issue on some level does weigh down a passport, which is why the British passport, despite having excellent visa-free travel and being a very interesting place to live for many people, did more poorly than a lot of mainland European countries, including some that you wouldn't generally think of as being quite as solid in terms of passports. And so, these are examples of how not all passports are created equal. Why, if I'm looking for a second passport, I don't want to look at a ranking of how many countries can I go to. I might want to look at, okay, I need to do business in China. All right, if I'm looking at Caribbean citizenship, Dominica and Grenada have that, right? Maybe not as big of an issue these days as China's closed. Up until recently, people would have said, I want to spend time, or I have business in Eastern Europe and I have business in Russia. Certain passports have visa-free access to Eastern European countries, including Russia, that could have been more interesting. Other people have said, hey, I'm an American. If I ever give up my US citizenship, I want to go back. That's a lot more tall order. Other people are saying I'm a South African. If I ever give up my South African citizenship, I want to be able to go back. Or whatever their country is, because I'm hearing from a lot more people in Canada, Australia, Germany in particular, that are saying, I think that my country might tighten up the screws on me as an expat one day. And so, how do I get a passport that allows me to go back? So those are specific questions that you can ask for yourself on a situational basis, but just counting up countries that are irrelevant. One of the tricks that I see from a lot of these companies that are based in Dubai, listen, I love Dubai. Nobody loves Dubai more than I do. But these companies in Dubai, they want to curry favor. And by the way, the UAE does have, on a numeric basis, a pretty good visa-free travel score. They don't have access to the US, which to me, for the average person, makes it not the best passport in the world, contrary to the claims of some. But they also have great visa-free travel in Africa. They've done an unparalleled job of getting visa-free travel to African countries. Not like e-visas or you pay $200 when you get there. Visa-free. They've done a spectacular job, unlike any other country, I think, in the world. Now, if you're African, or if you are doing business in Africa on a pan-African basis, that can be incredibly valuable. It also happens that UAE citizenship is nearly impossible to get, even as they start to open up a little bit of a window for that. Most people watching this wouldn't take it. But for the average person watching this video from the US or Canada or Australia or the UK, is your goal to go to Burundi without a visa? Does that really, increase your quality of life? Or Angola or Cape Verde? Is that where you want to go and spend your time? Nothing wrong with those countries. And I think, honestly, if you're young, hey, maybe there's plenty of business opportunities in Africa. But, to say that the UAE has a similar travel score to some European Union passports is obfuscating the fact that it has travel to countries that the average person in the citizenship marketplace is not looking to go to. The US, for example, Australia, for example. Not saying that that's where you want to go, but I'm saying these are the personal decisions. So not all passports are created equal. You want to look at the factors. The Nomad Passport Index does that. I encourage you to read it. I encourage you to think about your passport, the citizenship that you hold or the citizenships that you hold. How does that factor in? By the way, a couple average passports can easily equal one pretty good one, and that's why we talk about the passport portfolio. Understand the downsides of your passport and the downsides of your citizenship, and then you'll probably make better decisions about why you need to internationalize, why you need options in other countries. Don't stop now. We've got well over 1,000 more videos here on YouTube for you to watch and learn how to go where you're treated best. And if you want to work with Nomad Capitalist personally, go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply, learn about our unique, tried and true process, garnered over years of experience, and learn how you can become our client.